Hello, this is Dr. Lee Hildebrand, and today in my YouTube video, I want to address the power of positive self-talk. Now, where does this term self-talk come from? Exactly what does it mean? Well, when we look at the way our minds works and the communications that we have internally, this is the internal landscape that I'm talking about. You know that part of you that when you're in a room, it might be with other people, you might be by yourself in a quiet place, or you might be just driving in your car and you're having this inner dialogue, and you may even be saying, oh, why didn't you get that, or oh, you forgot that, or are you going to go do this? It literally is a dialogue in our minds. And the part of that is that dialogue with ourselves is what is termed self-talk. And that is, what is the tone of that dialogue? And what I have found in my work traditionally is that often people have a very difficult time having a positive outlook or self-talk with themselves. Now, some people make jokes and they kind of make fun of the fact, hey, do you talk to yourself? Everybody talks to themselves. Everybody has this type of thinking. Sometimes it's even out loud when other people are not around. We might be talking to ourselves, hey, how could you forget that, or what, or stupid, why did you, and oftentimes it has a negative focus to it. So this internal dialogue and self-talk, it can go one of two ways. It can be very negative, as I just alluded to, and many people have difficulty with this. I've had people share with me the way that they talk to themselves when they make a mistake or when something doesn't go the way that they would like. And it's incredible how brutal we can be with ourselves if we're taking that negative stance. And for whatever reason in human nature, I think there's a leaning to being critical upon ourselves. Sometimes we can internalize this kind of negative voice from family members that have not treated us the best, or classmates when we're young that may have been critical or teasing us, or different other ways that we kind of internalize this voice, this tape recorder that chirps in situations with negativity. And so this negative, let's start with negative self-talk. Negative self-talk is very common. The dialogue that we have with ourselves is probably 70% of our communication is literally with ourselves in terms of what we're thinking and what we're saying in our minds about situations and ourselves. So if that is negative, it really sets a negative precedent for how we're approaching and we're viewing the world. Negative self-talk can be very easy to do. It can become habitual. Think about that for yourselves. If you really give careful thought to how you think about your actions or your mistakes, are you somebody that has some compassion? Are you gentle with yourself? Are you understanding? Are you level-headed in that regard? Or do you find that you tend to be really very critical of yourself, critical of your appearance, critical of what you say, critical in other ways, and very intolerant of your humanity in regard to when you may make a mistake, or miss something, or forget something? So this negative self-talk can be very destructive, and it can be something that's learned over time, that can become a habit, and they can often, if we really look at it and analyze it, there are usually influences in our lives, important people in our lives that have communicated things or given us messages that we're just not enough, that we're not smart enough, that we don't look good enough, that we're not fast enough or thorough enough, all kinds of things. Now let's look at the opposite side of this, and that is positive self-talk. And positive self-talk is very much an important tool that we can bring to bear in regard to our mental health. It can help incredibly in regard to our well-being. It can help in regard to how we treat ourselves in situations, and then commensurately how we treat others. A lot of times with self-talk, if we have a negative critical voice upon ourselves, we're more than likely going to be critical of other people in our lives. We're going to not be as compassionate when they have an error or when they make a mistake. And so oftentimes that can really work against our relationships as well. The opposite is true. If we can develop the habit of positive self-talk, the habit of giving ourselves understanding and compassion as we're evaluating our actions and our choices, that can be a very powerful tool in regard to our overall attitude, our overall well-being, our overall sense of mental health, our mood, and how we treat other people. Now, how do you foster positive self-talk? How do you do this? One thing I'd recommend is practicing it. For instance, give yourself an exercise, and each morning when you wake up and you're getting ready to go to work or some other activity, and you're looking in the mirror, look at yourself and say 3 positive things about yourself that you like. Say 3 positive things about yourself that you may like. Now, for some people, this can be an incredibly hard thing to do, and I've seen it myself in working with clients on these kinds of things. It can be really difficult to love oneself in this way. And some people think that this is a form of conceit, that they've been taught that you need to be humble and modest at all times, and that any kind of self-acknowledgement is conceit. And that is simply not true. There's a big difference between conceit and what I would call appropriate confidence. Appropriate confidence is having a healthy viewpoint of yourself, communicating in healthy ways to yourself when you're evaluating situations, when you're approaching situations, when you're dealing with that part of you that might need reassurance at times. Appropriate confidence is being able to say, it's okay, we're going to get it next time. It's to be able to frame situations in positive ways when you have setbacks or when you make mistakes. You know what, it's okay, don't worry about it. Let's work on this over here, and then we're going to get another chance in the future. Or don't be too hard on yourself here, we'll figure it out. Or it's going to be okay. These kind of messages can be incredibly reassuring if we can give that gift to ourselves in situations versus the opposite, which would be defamatory statements. I can't believe you blew it again. You're never going to amount to anything. See, you really don't measure up. How could you be so stupid? What were you thinking? Those other kind of shame-filled statements that we allow ourselves to think in our minds tear us down. Back to positive self-talk. Positive self-talk builds us up. It gets us in a habit of mind where we have a gentle compassion toward ourselves as we're approaching life's obstacles. It helps us to think more clearly and freely because we're not gummed up in a sense of depression or shame or just ick with negative thinking and kind of self-beatings and verbal or emotional self-beatings in our minds. So another way to foster positive self-talk, in addition to the mirror exercise I talked about, and by the way, there's a great author, Beverly LaHaye, who has a book, I believe it's called Mirror Work, and she talks specifically about these strategies in terms of how we can use mirrors to improve the way that we approach ourselves, our esteem, our overall viewpoint on who we are, and also in building appropriate self-confidence. Another way that you can build this is that when you're by yourself or you're traveling in your car and you start to think about things, is to reflect on things in a positive way when you're reacting to situations. Another exercise that you can do is if you're driving home at the end of a day or the end of an event or a situation, is to do a review in your mind. Now, of course, in doing this review, you can think about what are some of the things that I can improve. And then in addition to that, I think you can look at what are some things I did really well. Go ahead, if you're in your car, and speak these out loud. Wow, Lee, I really like the way that you handled that situation. It was not an easy situation, and you handled that really well. Or I like the way that you thought of that other person and you made sure to, help with that aspect of it. Or I'm really glad that you remembered to pick up the so-and-so for the family, because that's really going to set you up to have a good weekend. It is healthy and it's appropriate to give ourselves self-validations or recognition of things that we do well. That is not conceit. That is not reflective of some kind of weird aspect in your mind that you would think positively or that you would talk to yourself. In fact, we all talk to ourselves. We might as well make it a good dialogue and a good conversation versus a toxic, unhealthy one. Believe me, many of you who struggle at times, like we all have, with negative self-talk, would not allow their spouse, their neighbor, their friends, or anything to talk to themselves the way that they talk to themselves. So we might as well look to try to make that a good dialogue in our minds as we're having this internal conversation. So those are several ways that you can do a review of situations and point out the positives to yourself. You can do the 3 things that you appreciate about yourself in the mirror. And the third thing that you can do is, for those that are in your circle that are safe and trustworthy, you can ask them for feedback, and you can ask them for positive feedback. It is okay to ask those that are in your corner for feedback about situations or validation about situations that can help you in building confidence, in addition to the constructive criticism. Too often times in work situations and maybe other situations, there's a culture that says, we're only going to tell you if you're doing something wrong. If you don't hear anything, then things must be going fine. And that situation is not ideal. In the culture at Lakeshore Psychology Services, which I direct, I really like to take the approach of, if I see somebody is doing something well or something that I appreciate about them, I will communicate that outright to them. I want to give them that encouragement in terms of what they're bringing and who they are and what they're doing. And I find, not only in my current organization, but others that I've ran and been a part of, to be a very important aspect of encouraging others in terms of their journey of their own self-talk. So we can take this self-talk and seek to move it in a positive direction for ourselves, to have compassion. Have compassion upon ourselves, to have perspective that has positive growth edge to it versus a tearing down, overly critical perspective to it. And then the result of that is we can carry that to other people. We can bring that outward and show other people both validation, compassion, encouragement. We can tell them things that can help make their day better, that can help them with their own internal dialogue, that can help them with how they are navigating the situations in their lives. So I hope this topic has been helpful to you in regard to how your internal dialogue goes. Many times we get certain mindsets that are a habit, and we can change habits. We can change habits through 2 things: intentionality and practice. So bring intentionality to the way that you speak to yourself, through the internal dialogue in your mind, and bring practice to that, and you can see changes as well. So thanks so much for joining me with this video today. Please don't hesitate to like the video or subscribe to my channel if you'd like other videos that I offer in regard to overall mental health, thriving, and resilience. Thank you so much for tuning in.